Welcome back to CAMS 1103. Who are the Dioscuri? Put it in the contest forum and enjoy the lecture.
So now we get to put it all together as far as the Metamorphoses is concerned by taking a look at Book 15. Now remember that the themes we've been following from the very beginning of the Metamorphoses are, on the one hand, the way that Ovid is criticizing Rome, and in particular Augustus, the guy with whom he's had such a problem and who will very soon exile him all the way out to the Black Sea. More or less because Ovid has been too much fun as a poet and too much fun as a guy. Remember, it was almost certainly mostly in connection with Ovid's love poetry that he got exiled, as far as we can tell, soon after Metamorphoses was done. And then the second theme that Ovid has been working on is a more general criticism of people and the way that people tend to use mythology the way the Greeks did, from Ovid's perspective, to glorify what it is to be human. And Ovid, partly as a result of his experiences in Rome, and partly it would seem just as a kind of natural inclination, which also made him want to take love poetry apart, and now is making him want to take epic apart. Ovid doesn't see it this way. Ovid wants his audience to grasp just how bad human beings are, rather than what they're used to grasping when they read mythological poetry, which is how good they are. Above all, remember, humanity has been celebrated recently in Virgil's Aeneid, which at the same time endorsed not just humanity, but Rome, and in particular Augustus, because Augustus is the descendant of Aeneas, and Augustus is completing the work that Aeneas began, according to the Aeneid, when he came to Italy and founded the city that would found the city that would found Rome. And it probably makes sense while we're talking about the origins of Rome to remind you of something that would have been always on Ovid's mind and always on the minds of his audience, which is the way that Rome itself gets founded. Remember Romulus and Remus, the she-wolf, they found a city, or they're about to found a city when all of a sudden Remus makes fun of Romulus' walls, and boom! Rome gets born in an act of fratricide. Now remember that right before Ovid's Floruit, as it's called, the time when he was doing his biggest work, Rome has experienced a horrific civil war, much worse than our own civil war, and just as divisive as our own civil war. And it was out of that civil war that Augustus finally took power. And a poet who comes not many years after Ovid, a poet by the name of Lucan, who worked under Nero and was finally forced to commit suicide by Nero, writes his own epic about the Civil War, called either the Civil War or Pharsalia, and he makes the connection nearly explicit between the fratricidal violence of the Civil War and the fratricidal origin of Rome itself. So the idea that Rome is a very fratricidal and violent place is in the air, and it's that we're now going to explore as the way that Book 15 brings it all together and levels Ovid's final and complete critique at humanity, at Rome, and at Augustus. And the end begins with a very strange feature of Book 15, which is the enormous speech of Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras, as far as we can tell, was actually a real person, but he was very quickly mythologized as the guy who did all that math stuff, including what we now know as the Pythagorean theorem, you know, the one about right triangles, and as a guy who founded a school of mathematical philosophers whom the Platonic philosophers had some contact with. The extent to which any individual thing that we hear about Pythagoras doing is something that the actual guy Pythagoras actually did is something that we can't know, but we do know certain things about the group that he founded, and one of them was that he believed in reincarnation, and another one was that he believed in an early form of vegetarianism. Now, it seems clear that the actual Pythagoreans didn't connect these two things, that is, the reincarnation and the vegetarianism, the way Ovid has Pythagoras do here. And so Ovid's invention gives us an indication of what he's doing with this bizarre long speech of Pythagoras. And so I'm going to read from Book 15 on page 356 of the Melville translation. This is Pythagoras talking. You race of men whom death's cold chill appalls, why dread the Styx, the dark, the empty names, sad stuff of poets, perils of a world that never was? Your bodies, whether age shall waste at last or burning pyre consume, be sure no ills can ever harm. Our souls are deathless. When they leave their former home, always new habitations welcome them, to live afresh. Myself, I well remember, was once Euphorbus in the Trojan War, Panthous' son, whom Menelaus killed, a spear thrust to the heart. I recognized not long ago the shield my left arm bore, a trophy hung in Juno's shrine at Argos. Everything changes, nothing dies. The soul roams to and fro, now here, now there, and takes what frame it will, passing from beast to man, from our own form to beast, and never dies. As yielding wax is stamped with new designs, and changes shape and seems not still the same, yet is indeed the same, even so our souls are still the same forever, but adopt in their migrations ever-varying forms. Therefore, lest appetite and greed destroy the bonds of love and duty, heed my message. Abstain. Never by slaughter dispossess souls that are kin, and nourish blood with blood. There are several very cool things about this passage. The first one of them is what I was talking about before I read it, which is the way that Ovid connects reincarnation with vegetarianism. What he's saying is, don't eat your web-footed friends because a duck may be your mother. That is, don't eat meat because the meat you might be eating could be somebody that you're related to because of this reincarnation thing. The next thing that's cool about this passage from Pythagoras' speech is that he's saying, as well as something about humans and meat eating and reincarnation, he's also saying something about the gods. And to understand this, you have to understand that most Romans would not have eaten meat. Most ancient people in general would not have eaten meat except when there was a sacrifice. Meat was something that was eaten at festivals of the gods, and there were lots of them. On very, very many days of the year, there would have been a sacrifice to the gods, and then after the bones had been burnt to the gods, the rest of the meal would be served to the humans. And so eating meat would be fundamentally connected to the gods, and it would have been very clear in the minds of Ovid's audience that it was the gods who encouraged people to eat meat. And so what we have here is the accusation again of being jerks laid against the gods. They're the ones who sponsor this violence that we do to our relatives, because our relatives, according to Pythagoras' speech, are reincarnated people. Does Ovid actually believe this? Well, I don't think it really matters. He's just putting another brick in the wall of his criticism of the way people act towards myth and towards the gods. And then the final and really most important thing that's cool about this passage of Pythagoras is that it's actually all about metamorphosis. Pythagoras is nearly as thematic a figure as Morpheus is in the story of Ceyx and Alcyone in Book 11. Pythagoras here is saying that the entire world is always changing, and we humans are always changing, and if we're going to live the right way, we need to realize that. We can't live the violent way we have been living. We can't think about the gods the way we have been thinking about the gods. When you understand metamorphosis, Ovid is saying through Pythagoras, you understand everything differently. And that's the basis on which he continues on into Roman history, more of Roman history, in Book 15, and finally brings us as close to the present time as he possibly can, which is what he promised us at the very beginning of Book 1.